You're very welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. Hard to believe the season is already up and running, and we're on to week 2. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined this week by Judah Fortgang. Judah, firstly, just a quick mention. I mean, football's back. We are, as you would always say, well and truly blessed.
That's right. We are so blessed. I almost have this fear of once the season started, it's going to be over before you know it. And I'm just trying to stay present and enjoy all that we have, because there's a long build up to it and then it goes by really quick. So just trying to enjoy it.
Yeah, try and enjoy best we can. And weekly we'll be here on a Wednesday with Judah and other guests throughout the season to preview the NFL action. Pretty decent start for Judah overall, landing the long shot. Very unlucky with the best bet, which we'll get to in just a minute. But a quick mention, if you are, wherever you're listening or watching, to hit that like button or subscribe and follow completely for free. It's the best way you'll get this podcast in your feeds when it lands. So just after recording. Mentioned for Money Back Bet Builder special, there'll be a weekly Money Back special, podcast special with Sam Farley every Friday on our social channels. So do check that out. It's a £5 risk-free bet. You will get your money back as a free bet if it loses. The timings for all games we cover here, if you check your description right now or post live recording, you'll see those timestamps there. Very easy to go from game to game. Inside.matchbook.com, you'll get a full recap of Judah's selections this week. That'll be available from Thursday. And last thing to mention for existing customers on Matchbook, if you do check out a promotions tab, we do have an NFL weekly bet builder offer. Get a free bet builder each week for Monday Night Football. All you have to do is place a £10 bet builder from any game from Thursday to Sunday, and you'll get a £5 free bet builder for each Monday on Monday Night Football. So that's every week throughout the NFL season. Judah, week 1 takeaways, and this is a good one to start with because we all know the stats by now on the amount of passing touchdowns. We were at 60-something in week 1 2 years ago. We're at around, we've been averaging mid-30s around that for the last 2 seasons on week 1, that is. Is that too small a sample size, or has the league sort of gone where teams know how to defend the pass so well that maybe it's efficient to start running the ball a bit more?
Yeah, I think it's almost like a combination of a few things. I mean, obviously, these are not kind of causes that only have one explanation. But I think for starters, the league just has not been able to kind of replenish the great quarterback play that we had basically in the last era of football. I mean, for the most part, since the Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa draft, there just haven't been as many quarterbacks that have kind of stepped in and become immediate stars. I mean, CJ Stroud's obviously the most notable exception to that. I think just quarterback play on a whole is worse. I think we're also seeing earlier on in seasons, quarterbacks who previously would have been behind a bridge starter. Someone like Bo Nix probably wasn't starting in a game 7 years ago in week 1. Andy Dalton probably has that job or someone of that caliber. So I think that just on a whole, quarterback play is worse. I think that is true. And also it is equally true in the NFL that there's this push and pull between coordinators effectively of what's most valuable. There was an explosive play era for a couple of years there that the Chiefs really exploited from 2018 to 2020. And then it was okay, we're going to start to play these two high shells. We're going to force everything underneath. And I think it is some push and pull. I don't think we're at the point where running is more efficient than passing, but it is also undeniable that passing is not as efficient as it used to be. And I think these things constantly change. And it's a good reminder, I think, of football as we know it is and that's kind of the beauty of the sport, is constantly changing. And the things that were true a couple of years ago, and even to some extent in previous weeks as we go along the season, are not always going to be true in the future and are not currently true in the present. So it's really the task of understanding what is the most relevant of sample sizes, what's the most relevant of data points, and kind of trying to build bets through that frame, I think is an extremely helpful way to go about it.
Okay, yeah, very interesting points, particularly on the maybe not as many big quarterback names or golden era of quarterbacks. So look, it's always cool to watch the college games and see is there any more up and coming ones. And like you said, it's such a small sample size for this season. So let's see where we are after a few weeks. And yeah, anything finally to add on that, Judah? Just the lack of the A-team quarterback starters, basically, or
yeah, that's what I mean. That's my best guess. Who knows?
Yeah, let's cover the 5. We're going to cover 5 games with Judah here. Judah's added an extra game to the slate. 4 of those games will be in the early window for those red zone viewers who want to maybe put a little multiple together to watch all at the one time. We've got the Saints at the Cowboys, Raiders at Ravens, Colts at Packers, Seahawks at the Patriots, and the Bengals at Chiefs will finish us off. Let's start with the Saints at the Cowboys and take a look at the betting that we currently have at matchbook.com. The Saints are 3.4 on the money line despite their impressive win over the Panthers. Cowboys 139, similar impressive win over the weekend. Saints +6 points. The Cowboys laying the 6 at 1.93, and the total here is 46.0. That's basically a coin flip. So yeah, Judah, we both seen both these teams get off to impressive wins. 6.5 is the point spread at the moment, and you're leaning towards the Saints in this.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot because, as you said, I think the narrative is almost that there are two impressive spots. And I think from the Cowboys' perspective, it's like, oh, the Cowboys really outperformed the Browns. But I'm not so sure that was not a take on the Browns, especially just looking at a lot of their kind of defensive metrics. They could not generate pressure. I don't think the Cowboys' offensive line magically got good. They were really not covering well. I think that game almost had a lot more to do with the Browns' defense not being particularly great in week one, or at least not as dominant as they were last year than it was the Cowboys putting together an impressive performance. And on the Saints side, I think the narrative is just like, oh, the Panthers really suck, and there's nothing else to do with it. But like, I'm not so sure we can be certain in any of these conclusions. Is it like, do we have to downgrade the Panthers? Of course. Is there also a reason for optimism on the Saints? Did they also play a great game? Certainly. I think that their increased use of motion. This was a team that was dead last in motion rate last season. Their use of play action, which was, I think, third this past week. These are kind of the easy buttons, so to speak, of how to make your offense a little more effective. And what I think is kind of the central question of this game is the Saints' offensive line was terrific last week. That could very well just be a function of the fact that they played the Panthers pass rush, which is basically non-existent. And they're going up against Micah Parsons now. So that is obviously a completely different beast. I think we're going to learn very quickly, is Clint Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator for the Saints, really, really good at almost mitigating the effects of pressure? Think of like San Francisco does not have a great line, but Brock Purdy does not see too much pressure. Even Jordan Love and the Packers, they do not have a particularly great offensive line, but he doesn't see pressure very often. I think we could be seeing, and this is a guy coming from the same coaching tree, or at least like a parallel one, a similar phenomenon, in which case I think the Saints are a very appealing team because they have a lot of weapons. And if you kind of put Derek Carr in the right situation, in the right scheme, he has been able to produce at a great clip, right? There's a difference between Derek Carr, if we were like making Madden grades and saying like, oh, Derek Carr is a 93, but he can produce at an extremely high clip in the right situation. And I think there's a distinction there of understanding that when we're betting on games, we're betting on production. We're not betting on like who is really good in the abstract sense of it. And I think in this Saints offensive scheme, there is at least a pathway towards that happening. So to bring it back to this game, I think it really just depends on like this defensive line and like, is Micah Parsons going to completely wreck the Saints offensive line? And like, this is all kind of meaningless because like Derek Carr is going to be who we thought he was if he's under pressure a lot. But I don't think it is as likely as the market is pricing that the Saints are just like who they were. I think we saw like a really marked change in how they're operating their offense. And I think it is certainly towards Carr's success that I'm cautiously optimistic on them. And I'm not so sold that the Cowboys offense is exactly in the best spot right now. They have some problems on the offensive line. The Saints generated a ton of pressure. Again, grain of salt, they were playing the Panthers. I think this is a wait and see approach, but I'm not sure the market kind of reacted properly to week one and the potential that the Saints have.
Okay, yeah, obviously we're dealing with small sample sizes, Judah, so that's going to be the theme of this week with the Cowboys Saints. Both impressive wins as we touched on at the top, but Judah is going to lean towards the Saints, thinking the market maybe hasn't given them enough respect for that win on week one. So leaning Saints at plus 6.5 in and around the 1.94 mark on Matchbook at the time of recording. Second game, Raiders at the Ravens. Both teams coming off a defeat here, so different sort of narrative again, the same team here. Take a look at the betting currently on Matchbook.com, and Raiders are 4.8 underdogs. The Ravens 124 favorites. The Raiders are getting a 9.0 head start at around 1.91, and the total here is 41.5. So, yeah, what did you make of both teams? Again, Judah, maybe start with the Raiders. thought they were quite poor overall against the Chargers, but yeah, there was maybe one or two poor play calls that could have got them back into the game late on. So yeah, your initial thoughts on their opening weekend.
Your Chargers there. I think football is particularly interesting as like there are certain path dependencies of how the game can go depending on like what the score is. And I'm looking at like the Raiders were up in this game. It was 6, I believe, with about a minute and a half left in the second quarter. They're driving. They're clearly throwing at will. And Gardner Minshew inexplicably just like, I don't even know what he did. I don't know. The ball slipped out of his hands or something. The Chargers pick it up. They score a field goal. I think that's probably at least a 6-point swing, if not more. And like, I think the game looks entirely different. Our reactions are entirely different if like that fluke play doesn't happen. If you kind of look at the underlying numbers, the Raiders were like passing the ball pretty efficiently, basically all day. As you alluded to, they refused to go for it on fourth down, which is like obviously a concern, but usually is not going to be magnified in the same way as it was. Also, I would be surprised if Antonio Pierce, in a similar situation in the future, does not go for it on 4th and 1. I would hope he learned his lesson, and I think the media definitely got on it for it.
But just on that, Judah, is it not just blatantly a really bad call? Like, how does that happen? I know it's week 1, new season, but it was terrible at the time. I think nearly everyone watching thought that this is just a terrible call.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that like 15 years ago, that's not really a like controversial call, but the league has just like the base rate of what the league does has moved so far, it's unheard of. It's inexplicable in every such way, but I think that's like the classic talking point. And the truth is, it's probably not going to matter going forward. There aren't like, it's kind of random if you're going to get into a 4th and 1 spot. It's less likely to happen than more likely to happen, I think. So all that is to say that like the Raiders, I think like put together a solid performance, and I think the narrative would look entirely different. And certainly, I don't think we would have gotten the line movement that we did had like at a key inflection point of this game, just like a really fluky thing not happened. Not to mention all of the other kind of flukiness with the 4th down decision making. If you look at the Ravens side of things, I'm a little bit concerned about the defense. Like, granted, they were playing the Chiefs. Like, that is, you should not expect the shutdown defense that they had last year. But they were really bad by basically any way you want to look at it, even in ways that, and like Patrick Mahomes is going to influence how the game is played and how the stats kind of shake out. But a lot of concerning rates with their ability to generate pressure, their coverage, all of these things were far worse than they were last year. And this is a spot I don't have, I think, the strongest of priors from the offseason this year as I have in years past. But I do think the Ravens, like, they lost a lot, especially their defensive coordinator, and I think it matters here. On the offensive side of the ball, the Ravens' offensive line is like pretty weak. I mean, Ronnie Stanley's a terrific left tackle, but the rest struggled, and they struggled again in week 1 on Sunday. And Las Vegas led the NFL in quick pressures in week 1, and I don't think that's a function of like the Chargers' offensive line being particularly bad. They've got some standouts at the tackle spot, but like Max Crosby's a game wrecker. They have a bunch of other pieces there to disrupt opposing offenses, and I think that matters a lot in a spot against the Ravens. I think there's just way too much credit and credence to what the Ravens have done in years past, and I just don't see that as the team that they are, and certainly not backed by the week 1 data. I think 10 points is just far too many here. The Raiders are not a bottom tier team, at least not right now in the current moment, I don't think. And the Ravens are not the elite team that they were last year. They're just like materially different in some massive spots. The defense is totally different. The offensive line's totally different. They lost a bunch of receiving depth. I mean, like, they basically were just throwing to Zay Flowers until the very last drive when Rashad Bateman had a catch. The receivers couldn't get anything going. This spot is just 10 points is far too many.
Okay, yeah, we'll lock in that. Pretty decent case for the Raiders overall, plus 10.0 in around the 1.8 on Matchbook, and the line is 9.5 at the moment. So go to those alternative handicap markets, and of course also available through the Bet Builder product, which you gave a good mention to last week. Game 3, and look, maybe it's just because week 2, Jude, I feel all these games have so many more questions to answer. We got so many questions answered in week 1, yet we're here in week 2 with more questions to answer. But yeah, Colts of the Packers. I mean, storyline here. Let's take a look at Betty. You can see here available on matchbook.com. The Colts are 1.63 favorites. The Packers 258. The point spread currently sees the Packers getting a 3-point head start, and the total for this game is currently set at 41.0. I mean, the big storyline here, Judah, the last play of the game, I was watching the YouTube highlights the following day, and I saw the tackle. I didn't think it looked overly bad until I went onto Twitter or X and saw the reaction to Jordan Love. I think 3 to 6 weeks he's out for.
Yeah, you really hate to see it. I mean, like, for the most part, I thought, like, done a great job avoiding quarterback injuries. The preseason, week 1, it almost seemed like it was smooth sailing. Obviously, this happened on Friday night in the second game. But
they look so good, the Packers. The snippets I saw, like, they just seem to be driving well on Jordan Love. And I felt there was a potential in this team. It was a tough opening weekend for them, but there was serious
100%.
potential.
100%. And they have so many weapons at wide receiver and so many guys that can beat you. Like, they're extremely, extremely explosive, all those guys. And they really have a lot of depth and a lot of pieces. It's a real shame that Jordan Love went down. But I think there might not be a bigger drop-off between a starter and backup than Jordan Love to Malik Willis. I mean, Malik Willis has 300 or so career dropbacks, and it's a complete disaster. The man is magnetic to generating pressure and sacks. His pressure to sack rate, that is the rate at which you get sacked from when on plays when you do have pressure, is like 33%. It is outrageously high. It's like 5% more than the next best or next worst quarterback in pressure to sack. I just don't see this as like he's not a legitimate quarterback in the NFL, I don't think. And no matter how good the situation is, I think he is so far on the kind of left end of the distribution of a quarterback that, like, it doesn't matter if he's put in the perfect scheme. His just ability to draw pressure is unparalleled, frankly. And I think that almost tanks the Packers' chance of success. And on the flip side of the ball, like, the Colts are going to be an extremely volatile offense. And I think they're going to succeed in spots where they can really start to run the ball and kind of rely on this run and gun type game of using Jonathan Taylor, using Anthony Richardson in the run game, and then trying to kind of draw the safeties in and try and take the deep shots as they had some success. It was obviously a mixed bag in week 1, but I think that spot works against Packers. I mean, like, we're going on like year 6 now of the Packers not being able to stop the run. They brought in a new defensive coordinator. Saquon Barkley still ran for 100 yards. I think this is a great setup for the Colts. I think the strength of the Packers defense probably going to be in their secondary. And I don't think that's going to be particularly relevant in this game because I think it's going to be decided by the Colts running the ball. And when you just think about it, it's a capable offense on the Colts side. I think they're going to score. There's nothing the Packers do defensively that should slow down the Colts. And Malik Willis is just not. I don't think he's a capable starting quarterback in the NFL. There's not much more analysis than that. I absolutely love the Colts in the spot.
Okay, yeah, and you're going to lay the -3.5 versus the -3. So -3 is around 1.91, and obviously the big jump given the key number, but you're happy to take a bigger price on -3.5.
That's right.
Let's do it. 2.1 at the time of recording. Seahawks at the Patriots. I have Seahawks down in my bad books here, -6.5, win by 6 at the weekend, though. So it's hard for me to be positive about the Seahawks here, but it was a very impressive second half. That is, the Seahawks 162 favorites to the Patriots were 256. Their Seahawks are laying 3, and the total is 37.5. Would you have question marks on Seahawks, Judah, on that first half offensive performance plus the 2 safeties? So I think the whole package in that first half was really bad.
Yeah, I think the offense was definitely questionable. But to your point, like, a lot of weird things are going to happen when you're starting drives constantly inside your own 5-yard line. Like, stuff happens, and like you end up in a weird spot in a game script, and that can almost like dictate the outcome. It's why I'm like very, very hesitant to look at a result of something and more so just like the process by which we got there. But yeah, I'd still be semi-concerned about the Seahawks offense. I was semi-concerned about the Seahawks offense before the season started. Their offensive line is a massive question mark. I don't think that's going to matter particularly much against this Patriots defense. I think that we had some really, really fluky, interesting statistical anomalies, I guess, in the Bengals Patriots game, which the Bengals generated a ton of pressure, the highest pressure rate, not quick pressure rate, but highest pressure rate of any team. Yet they made a coverage mistake on nearly 90% of their plays, which is a like 99th percentile performance over the last 5 years. I don't think that's going to. I don't think that's like a function of the Patriots wide receivers being great. I think it was just a really weird spot. I think where there is signal is the fact that, like, and we all saw this. You don't want to take too much away from the preseason. You don't want to take anything really away from the preseason. But just like looking at this team on paper and watching them, the offensive line's a complete disaster. They're going up against the Seattle defense, and like Mike McDonald has just been raining terror on offenses for almost two years now. I don't see how the Patriots are not going to be constantly swarmed by pressure. The Seahawks did a decent job with that in week 1 as well. And on the offensive side of the ball, I don't think they need to not that much needs to go right for them, because I think this is such a lopsided defensive battle, at least in the Seahawks. The Patriots like barely scored in week 1. They're like not really looking to push the ball downfield at all. They're entirely reliant on their run game. It's a very one-dimensional offense. And then like the Seahawks are going to get their shots. I think they're going to get a lot of drives. We know Geno Smith likes to throw the ball downfield. That's his best area of his game. They have all the talent. I'm not ready to like go and say, okay, they had a really terrible week 1 performance. These teams are in completely different tiers. I think that kind of gets to the point of the Colts and Packers too, which is I think these teams are just not in the same ballpark of quality. When Malik Willis is your quarterback, when you have like the Patriots roster as currently constructed, and you're going up against teams like the Seahawks or the Colts, they're not in the same tier. And I think anytime we kind of get a number that is like just around 3, I'm going to be taking the team that I think is just like far more stable and has far more going for it than these really questionable spots. It's not that complex of analysis, I don't think. But you just add up the fact that Mike McDonald and the Seahawks defense has a massive matchup advantage against the Patriots offensive line. And just like the Seahawks are a stable team. They're going to score some points on offense. I just like the Seahawks here.
Okay, yeah, and like keep it simple, like you said, Judah. Seahawks better team. If take the -3 here, currently around 188. I feel your cases are getting stronger as we go on, Judah. I'm liking it so far. You're getting into your rhythm here throughout this NFL season. The big game or game of the weekend through Sunday and Monday, that is, but maybe the Thursday night football just shades it. But Bengals at the Chiefs. Bengals 3.15, 3.25 now, underdogs. Bit of money there. Chiefs 141 favorites. Bengals getting a 5.5 head start, and the total here is 47.5. Joe Burrow has a superb record against Mahomes. Judah, are you reading anything into that sort of stuff? I mean, he has a great record against some of the best quarterbacks in this league, and then one of the worst records against some of the bad quarterbacks in this league. I think it's the best way of putting it. He is, I think, year 5 or 6 into his NFL career. It's some good in there, but a lot of bad and injuries too. It's just been a frustrating one for Bengals fans, particularly after that defeat last week to the Patriots that we just spoke about.
Oh, for sure. I think it's not so much of a surprise that one of the best quarterbacks and one of the best teams in the last 4 years has a good record against the good teams. We've seen this show from the Bengals before. They've lost some really inexplicable games over the years. I remember when they lost to Cooper Rush and the Cowboys as 7-point favorites in week 2 a couple of years ago. They lost to the Steelers when Joe Burrow threw 5 picks in a game. This stuff happens. I'm not overreacting. There was also some weird variance in this game. Failed 4th downs, punt return, fumbles, a bunch. And as I said, they whole entire statistical anomaly of the Bengals defense with a really, really bad outlier performance in coverage. I'm not too concerned. I think the Chiefs, and again, there's an interesting element of how do you react to week 1 data, right? Which sample is most relevant? I think for the Chiefs, you want to be much quicker to update relative to other teams, right? Because they have such a stable base, because we know how good Mahomes is. We can have confidence in Mahomes. We can have confidence in Reed. I was very encouraged by a lot of the downfield elements that the Chiefs had, and certainly by most efficiency numbers were terrific and a lot closer to an earlier version of the Chiefs team. But with that all said, like, and getting back to our earlier points of like coverage has changed in the NFL, like both of these quarterbacks had extremely shallow ADOTs. Their depth of targets were 5.9 and 6 yards respectively. Teams are playing the too high structure. They're trying as best as they can to take away the deep shots. And I think both of these quarterbacks are smart enough to know not to push the ball into double coverage and just like take what's there. And I think that leads to a lot of these very slow games, extended drives, trying to effectively use the short passing game as like an extension of the run game. And with that in mind, I think the total is just too high. It's not a spot where I'm comfortable enough betting, just because I think there's a lot of mass on the possibility of like this Chiefs offense being elite and being back to this top unit where like they can basically carry them on their own. But I do think it lends itself to a game of unders, and especially if Joe Burrow is not fully healthy. I think this game plays relatively slow. I don't think the Bengals are going to be as bad in coverage. I think they will be able to generate a solid pass rush. And it's, to me, a much slower game. Not the strongest of leans. I think it's a pretty interesting game to play out. Obviously, anytime these two teams play, it's always a great time and something you look forward to. But I want to take more of a wait and see. I just see a pretty slow game.
Okay, that's a lean to the under 47.5. And Judah's other lean on the card was Saints plus 6.5 at the Cowboys. But 3 official bets put up Raiders plus 10.0 at Ravens, Colts minus 3.5 at the Packers, and then Seahawks lane 3 at the Patriots. Insights on matchful.com. Full recap of all those bets. Let's move on to any other bets, Judah. So look, when you see Giants money line initially on the sheet, you go, I mean, it was Judah watching week one, but obviously they're up against the Commanders. This could be the spot maybe to get them at an all-time low at odds against here, 2.12. So give us a take of where these two teams are at and why you think perhaps there's a bit of value back in the Giants this week.
Yeah, precisely what you said. I think a lot of what's being priced in is, well, did you watch week one? And it's like, yeah. But that's just like, did we not learn anything new about the Giants? Did we not know that like this sort of performance was in the realm of possibilities? Of course we knew that. The Giants were under a ton of quick pressure. I think this is like a really, really speak about like how do you read into certain games, right? We talked about the Panthers Saints game. I think this is another really interesting spot where the takeaway was just like, oh, the Giants are bad and like they suck. As opposed to like, there's also a world of possibility where like the Vikings defense is way better than initially anticipated. And the Giants offense was like every bit, it was bad. There's no getting around it. They're not elite. They're not going to be able to overcome incredible matchups, but it might just be that like the Vikings defense is really, really good. And we're going to look back at this matchup and say like, yeah, they went up against one of the best defenses in the league and really floundered. That's possible too. I'm not saying it's necessarily likely, but it's definitely possible. And I think when you look at the Commanders, just taking a kind of bird's eye view, I think this might be the worst roster 2 through 52 in the league. I mean, they are like, listing names isn't even helpful of the guys in their secondary, but like most of these guys would be backups, if not third stringers on other teams. The secondary is atrocious. They don't have any pass rush. Like Olame Zaccheaus is getting reps at wide receiver too. They basically only have Terry McLaurin to throw the ball to. It's a disaster. The Giants' defensive line, at least, was productive. Kayvon Thibodeau was not particularly great. But the rest of the D-line was great. They were generating a lot of this disruption pressure. That's pressure that basically forces a quarterback out of his rhythm or out of his timing. They did a lot of that. They're going to have a great matchup against the Commanders in this spot. I like Jaden Daniels was much better than expected in his pocket awareness and his ability to kind of avoid sacks from pressure. But I'm not sold on that being exactly the case. Again, it was a 1 week sample. I just like, again, I think these teams are like very similar, and the Giants like 2 through 52 is so much better than Washington. I think they like actually have, I mean, their secondary is bad, but I'm not sure Jaden Daniels and Washington's going to be able to take advantage of I think these are spots where you want to look into like matchup details here, and there's nothing about this game which says like, oh, the Commanders have a matchup advantage. There are areas where the Giants are clearly superior, and that is like their pass rush going up against the Washington offensive line. I think it's an overreaction to week one, and these teams are not that dissimilar. I'm going to take the Giants when we're getting some plus money here.
Okay, yeah. Decent case, I would say. Maybe hasn't quite got me to a bet on that game. I might sit that one out. But Giants money line 2.12, and any other bet for Judah. And Judah went 1-0 on his long shots last week. The Bucks -9.5, won by 17 versus Commanders. That was 9-4, 3.25 at the time of recording. Good shout, Judah. But obviously you didn't watch Jim Harbaugh's Chargers there last week. Jim Harbaugh is back, baby, and you're going against the Chargers here. I can't fathom this, to be honest, Judah.
Yeah,
but
I'm trying to
dampen my expectations here on the Chargers.
I'm trying to channel my inner Drew and think about what is the least sensible money line take.
Yeah.
And I mean, it seemed to work last year. Yeah, I think.
Do you remember? Just Drew picked like the Giants one week, and it just was never on. It was like a 5.0 shot, and I didn't back it, and they absolutely won anyway. But go on.
Patriots over the Bills. It was a wild ride. It was like week 6 through 10, just a let me take the one where I was just like, what are you doing? Like that, you cannot possibly be taking this. But yet here I am. Yeah, I mean, like. I think there was like I've never experienced a sell-off of a team after 1 week quite like the Panthers did. Bryce Young was bad, but like as we've talked about now numerous times, like path dependencies in football matter a lot. This game would look very different if Bryce Young was knocked down like 14-0 in a blink of an eye. And I think the narrative around the Chargers game was very different than reality, as we talked about. Like one fluke play there, and I think people are talking about it very differently. This is a Chargers offense that could not throw the ball. I don't think that they have particularly great weapons, which is a little bit of a problem, at least to start with. I think it's possible that some of their young guys get a little better as the season goes along, but they were not comfortable in the passing game. And like their defense was bad, straight up bad. They were able to generate a little bit of pressure, which was probably going to be a problem for the Panthers. But the way the market has reacted to this game going all the way to 6.5, it's far too much off of like not enough evidence. And I think that like everything that was true about the Panthers, and I'll just emphasize this, is still true. Everything you're saying in the offseason is still true now. That isn't to say that like I'm willing to back them on the spread. I'm not like, I don't think the median here is that the Panthers are outperforming, but I think there's a world of possibility where we're like, okay, we way overreacted to week one. It was a weird game script. The Panthers were down right off the bat, and the Chargers defense is a problem, and their offense is kind of not really in sync, and they just want to run the ball, and they can take themselves out of a game almost just by virtue of like having Justin Herbert in 3rd and longs because they can't get their run game going. Again, this is a long shot. It's not a matter of something being kind of what's most likely to happen, but I really do see a world in which like we were really, really, really overreacting to week one on both sides of the ball here. And what we said about the Panthers in the offseason can still remain to be true. Again, that doesn't mean it's likely to be true, but it can be true. And I think there's just some value in responding to kind of how the market reacted.
Yeah, and look, and there's definitely it's a small bit of an overreaction. Whether it'll be enough, who knows? But look, even looking at some of the players Chargers lost in the summer there, like Keenan Allen, etc. Yeah, I could feel maybe getting those seeing those effects coming in midway through the season, perhaps, or maybe not seeing it at the moment. But yeah, who knows? We'll move on to best bet time, and this is a game we've covered already. But you were very unlucky on the alternative spreads last week, given the Lions at one stage looked like they were going to see the game out there against the Rams. And I know they were lucky in the end to cover -5.5, but we did the alternative, I think, -9.5. This is another alternative handicap at around 2.4. You're going for the Colts -5.5 at the Packers.
Yeah, I think that we talk about points kind of existing in two spheres. They are both a way of like reflecting fundamental value of teams and kind of easily comparing it. And also they exist as real points in real games. And I think like the thesis here primarily is like these teams are in different tiers. Why? because Malik Willis is not really a capable NFL starting quarterback. I don't think that any system or any matchups really going to matter. He is like so far on the left tail of his like inability to mitigate pressure and sacks that I just see this offense as really, really struggling here. And the Colts are just like going to be able to run the ball. I think nothing's ever certain in this league, but I see this as like a spot where they can build a lead. They should have no problem at least getting to, 21, 24 points, riding this run game with plenty of possessions, because I just don't see this Packers offense, especially in like Malik Willis also didn't come over like very least, not had a lot of time in this system. I don't see the Packers as being able to put up any points here. And I like the Colts to be able to build and win with margin.
Okay, yeah, best bet on the card. Colts -5.5 at the Packers. You're getting a bit of plus money there, 2.4. We're done. Thanks to Judah. Enjoyed that. We ran through as many bets and games as possible in the time allowed. For those watching or listening, wherever you're watching or listening, do hit that like button and subscribe or follow completely for free. Check out insights.matchbook.com. Full recap of all Judah's bets put up today. And other than that, we will chat to you next Wednesday. Enjoy week 2 of the NFL season. Bye-bye.